Some people think they're in control until the wrong word, the wrong tone, the wrong moment takes the wheel, and suddenly they're not responding, they're reacting. A rush of anger, a wave of anxiety, a flood of sadness. And just like that, they're no longer living, they're being lived by their emotions. But the Stoic sees things differently. He understands that emotions are natural, but not sovereign, that they are guests, not kings, that to feel something is not the same as being ruled by it. You can feel anger without lashing out. You can feel fear without fleeing. You can feel sadness without collapsing. This is the heart of Stoicism, not suppression, but strength, not emotional numbness, but emotional clarity, a space between the stimulus and the response, a choice, a breath, a pause that changes everything. Because when emotion runs your life, you're not living, you're reacting. But when you train your reason, when you root yourself in principle, you become steady, calm, immovable, like a tree in the storm. Bent, maybe, but never broken. So if you're tired of being pushed around by your own feelings, if you're ready to become the master of your mind instead of its hostage, this episode is for you. Let's begin. 1. Emotions are signals, not commands. What if I told you that most of your suffering doesn't come from what you feel, but from what you do with what you feel? That emotion, in itself, is not the enemy, but how we respond to it often is. Every day, you experience waves of emotion: anger, fear, joy, sadness, envy, frustration. These are not mistakes. They are not flaws. They are biological, ancient signals wired into your nervous system to alert you, to inform you, to guide your attention. But here's the problem. Most people confuse the signal for a command. They believe that because they feel something, they must obey it. They feel anger, so they must yell. They feel fear, so they must avoid. They feel shame, so they must hide. They feel offended, so they must strike back. The Stoic steps in and says, no. He says, feel deeply, but respond wisely. Because to the Stoic, emotions are like weather. You don't control when it rains, but you do control whether you panic or pause and take shelter. Just because the sky darkens doesn't mean you have to throw away your plans. Similarly, just because anger flares doesn't mean you must unleash it. Just because fear rises doesn't mean you must retreat. The difference between the untrained and the disciplined mind lies not in what is felt, but in what is done next. Stoicism teaches us to honor our emotions without being enslaved by them. This is not about becoming cold or robotic or numb. That's a common misunderstanding. The Stoic doesn't shut off his emotions. He learns from them. He sees them as data, not destiny. When fear shows up, he doesn't run. He listens. What am I afraid of? Why? Is it real? Is it useful? When sadness lingers, he doesn't drown. He sits with it. He reflects. What belief is causing this? What loss am I mourning? Is this grief or is it regret? And when anger explodes, he doesn't become the anger. He breathes. He steps back. He asks, what boundary was crossed? What expectation was unmet? Is this anger pointing to injustice or just my ego being bruised? You see, emotions are like the warning lights on your dashboard. They don't tell you exactly what's wrong, but they let you know something needs attention. The immature mind yanks the wheel the moment a light flashes. The wise mind slows down, examines, and navigates with intention. Here's a simple truth. You are not what you feel. You are what you do with what you feel. And that's why this principle matters so much. Because in a world that rewards instant reaction, instant outrage, and emotional chaos, the Stoic holds still. He observes. He notices the rise of emotion, but doesn't climb aboard. He listens to the signal, but refuses to follow every command. This is a skill, a discipline, and like all forms of mastery, it takes time. It means practicing that tiny pause between the emotion and the response, that sacred moment where clarity can speak louder than impulse. It means training your nervous system not to collapse under discomfort, but to breathe through it. It means remembering again and again that your peace is not found in avoiding emotions, but in not being owned by them. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, wrote in his Meditations, "External things are not the problem. It's your assessment of them, and you have the power to revoke that any time." The same is true of emotion. The anger is not the problem. The panic is not the problem. The sadness, the frustration, these are not your enemies. The problem is when you believe they are commands you must obey. And so the Stoic path is not to silence emotion. It is to be so grounded in reason, so practiced in clarity, so centered in self-awareness, that emotion becomes a tool, not a tyrant. So next time you feel that emotional spike, the heat of offense, the grip of fear, the sting of criticism, don't act. Pause, listen, learn. Let the emotion deliver its message. Then thank it and choose your response. Because that's the moment you stop being a slave to emotion and start becoming a master of yourself. 2. Use reason as your compass. When the sea gets rough, the sailor doesn't throw away his compass. He leans on it. He checks his direction not with emotion, but with precision. That's what reason is for the Stoic. Not just a tool, but a compass. A steady guide when the waters of life begin to churn. In a world that glorifies raw feeling and reactive behavior, using reason can seem almost radical. But it is reason, not rage, not panic, not impulse, that creates clarity. It is reason that allows you to see things as they are, not as your fears or desires distort them to be. And this isn't about being robotic or detached from life's richness. It's about seeing life clearly and choosing to respond from a place of wisdom, not instability. Think about your last emotional decision, one driven by impulse, by anger, jealousy, or fear. What came of it? Did it move you forward? Did it honor your values? Or did it leave behind damage you later had to repair? Emotions are fast, but reason is accurate. Emotions react, reason reflects. The Stoic knows this. He trains his mind to pause before making meaning, to question before accepting, to slow down before acting. But using reason doesn't mean you ignore your emotions. It means you run them through a deeper filter. For example, you might feel insulted by someone's words. But what does reason say? Were their words truly about you, or a reflection of their own pain? Was their attack personal, or just emotional noise? Reason invites you to see beyond the surface. It whispers, slow down. Don't believe the first story your mind tells you. This is where freedom begins, in the gap between stimulus and response. That space where you can challenge assumptions, where you can ask yourself, is this really true? Is this useful? What would a wiser version of me do right now? These questions are the compass points of a Stoic life. They don't give you all the answers, but they keep you from drifting into chaos. Even in ancient times, philosophers understood the power of reason. Epictetus said, "It's not things that disturb us, but our opinions about them." That sentence contains an entire philosophy, because if it's your opinion that causes the pain, then it is within your power to change it. And if it's within your power, then you are not a victim. You are responsible. That responsibility begins by choosing reason as your first response. Not anger, not fear, not blame, but thought, consideration, clarity. And the more you do it, the more you realize emotions pass, but actions stay. One wrong decision in a moment of rage can destroy a decade of progress. One moment of reason, however, can preserve your peace, your dignity, and your direction. This is why Stoicism values reason above all, because when you're anchored in reason, you don't need perfect circumstances. You don't need everyone to agree with you. You don't need the world to change. You can walk through the storm with your mind intact, your heart calm, your purpose clear. You become like the lighthouse, unmoved by the waves, not because the waves don't crash, but because your foundation is solid, because you've trained yourself to think, to reflect, to decide, not just to react. So when the pressure rises, when emotions swirl, when the world pulls you in 1,000 directions, stop, breathe, ask yourself, what would reason do here? Then follow that answer, not because it's easy, but because it leads you to the person you're meant to become. 3. Observe without obeying. There's a powerful moment, often missed, rarely practiced, that separates a life of reaction from a life of mastery. It's the moment when you notice an emotion without becoming it, when you observe anger without shouting, when you sense anxiety without running, when you sit with discomfort without needing to numb it. That moment is power. It's not glamorous, it's not loud, it's quiet, internal, invisible to others. But it is the birthplace of self-control. The Stoics understood this deeply. They taught that while we cannot always control what we feel, we are never obligated to obey it. You are not your feelings. You are the one who observes them. This shift in identity, from being the emotion to witnessing it, is subtle but transformative. Because the second you realize you have a feeling, rather than are the feeling, you create distance. And in that distance, there is space to choose. Imagine a fire alarm going off in your house. Just because it's loud doesn't mean there's a fire. It might be steam from the shower. It might be a false trigger. You don't jump out the window. You don't panic. You investigate. You assess. That's what observation looks like. You hear the internal alarm, the irritation, the fear, the jealousy. But instead of obeying it, you question it. You sit with it. You watch it. This is not suppression. Suppression pushes emotions down, hides them, denies them. Observation does the opposite. It brings them into the light, into awareness, where they lose their grip. You can't change what you don't see. But once seen, emotion loses its power to control you. It becomes information, not an order. So how do you practice this? You begin by slowing down, by creating a pause between what you feel and what you do. When a triggering moment arises, someone cuts you off, criticizes you, ignores you. Notice what comes up. Don't act yet, just observe. Where in your body do you feel it? What story is your mind starting to tell? What urge is pulling you? And then, instead of reacting, you sit, you breathe, you study. Over time, this becomes a habit, a new default. Where others lash out, you lean in. Where others lose control, you remain grounded. This is emotional alchemy, turning reactivity into awareness. You're not avoiding life. You're experiencing it more clearly, more truthfully, without the fog of unchecked emotion distorting your vision. Seneca once said, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." That delay is what observation creates. A moment to ask, is this emotion valid? Is it helpful? Is it about now? Or is it old pain dressed in a new disguise? Sometimes just by naming the emotion, this is frustration, you weaken its hold, because when you can name it, you can tame it. And here's what's beautiful. This practice doesn't just make you more stoic, it makes you more human, more present, more compassionate. You start seeing your emotions not as enemies, but as signals to understand. You start realizing that other people's behavior is often just their own unobserved emotion leaking out. And suddenly, you stop taking things personally. You stop getting pulled into every storm. You become an island of stillness in a chaotic world, not because you don't feel, but because you no longer serve what you feel. You lead it, you study it, you respect it, but you don't let it make your choices. So next time an emotion rises, don't fight it, don't flee it, just watch. And in that watching, you'll discover something rare and powerful: freedom. 4. Mastering emotion is mastering the self. To control your emotions is not to erase them. It's to rise above their control. It's to become the author, not just the character, the sculptor, not just the stone. And for the Stoic, there is no greater achievement than self-mastery. Because when you master the self, you master your entire life. We often hear people say, "That's just how I am, I'm emotional," or "I can't help it, I just react." But beneath those statements lies a silent resignation, a surrender of power. They believe their emotions are fixed, unstoppable forces. They don't realize those same emotions that pull them left and right, up and down, don't have to dictate their direction. You can feel the storm without being blown off course. Mastering your emotions doesn't mean you never get angry, sad, or afraid. It means those feelings don't override your values. You can still feel anger, but not let it poison your speech. You can feel sadness, but not let it halt your discipline. You can feel fear, but still take the next courageous step. That is the real mark of strength, to move with your emotions without being moved by them. The Stoics believed that emotion was not the enemy, but emotional slavery was. Epictetus put it simply, "No man is free who is not master of himself." This isn't a metaphor, it's a practical truth. Because if your anger can decide what you say, if your anxiety can make you run, if your pride can make you break your own values, then who is really in charge? Imagine your mind like a chariot. Your thoughts are the reins. Your emotions are the horses. Without training, the horses run wild. They charge wherever they want, crash into obstacles, and drag you into chaos. But when you train the horses, when you develop patience, awareness, and restraint, you can steer, you can direct that power. The horses still run, but they run for you, not against you. And what happens when you master the chariot? You move through life with calm. You no longer panic at every twist, every insult, every change. You become the same in success and in failure, in applause and in silence, in love and in loneliness. That doesn't mean you're numb, it means you're free. Because real freedom is not doing whatever you feel, it's doing what's right, regardless of how you feel. This mastery isn't given, it's earned, through repetition, through reflection, through those countless small moments when you pause instead of reacting, breathe instead of lashing out, speak from clarity instead of chaos. Over time, those small choices form a new identity, one not ruled by impulse, but by principle. You begin to notice something profound. Most people are chasing control over others, over situations, over outcomes. But the Stoic chases something higher, control over himself. Because when you have that, you don't need to manipulate the world. You don't fear it. You don't fight it. You stand firm in who you are. So ask yourself, who do I become when emotion rises? Do I abandon myself, or do I return to myself? Do I let the moment define me, or do I define the moment? Because mastering emotion is not about silence, it's about sovereignty. It's about walking into every moment with the quiet power of someone who owns their thoughts, their reactions, their life. 5. Stillness is a choice. In a noisy world that thrives on urgency, stillness can feel like rebellion. But for the Stoic, it is not an escape. It is a form of strength. Stillness isn't the absence of movement. It's the presence of control. It's not passive. It's powerful. It's a deliberate refusal to be dragged by the chaos around you or within you. The world will try to convince you that movement equals progress, that if you're not reacting, you're losing, that if you're not loud, you're irrelevant. But that's a lie fed by a culture of distraction. Real strength isn't in how quickly you respond, but in how clearly. And clarity is born from stillness. Stillness doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you stop being ruled by what you feel. When something painful happens, a rejection, a betrayal, an insult, the default response is usually to react, to defend, to prove. But the Stoic resists this reflex. He pauses, he steps back, he chooses to be still, not because he's weak, but because he refuses to let someone else dictate his state of mind. Think about it. How often do we act just to escape discomfort? We text out of boredom. We lash out because of fear. We speak just to fill silence. But silence itself is not the enemy. It's the space where truth emerges. When you learn to sit in that stillness, with your thoughts, your fears, your impulses, you begin to see them clearly. And clarity is the foundation of power. The Stoics trained themselves to remain calm in storms, not because the storm disappeared, but because they no longer needed it to. They understood that the moment you become reactive, you give away your power. You become a puppet pulled by every emotional string. But stillness severs those strings. It roots you. Stillness is also a gateway to insight. It's in moments of quiet, early mornings, late nights, silent walks, that your best thinking happens, that you remember what truly matters, that you hear the voice beneath all the noise. And the more you practice it, the more it becomes your default. While others rush to respond, you learn to wait, to breathe, to let the initial wave pass, and then act from clarity, not chaos. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic, ruled an empire in crisis, yet wrote about calm like it was a sacred duty. In his journal, he reminded himself daily, "Be like the rock that the waves keep crashing over. It stands unmoved, and the raging of the sea falls still around it." That's not just poetry, it's a way of life. You can be that rock, but only if you choose stillness over noise, presence over panic. Even today we see this in people who radiate calm in pressure, leaders who don't panic when things go wrong, parents who don't scream when children misbehave, athletes who don't flinch under pressure. What separates them? It's not just training, it's the discipline of stillness, the inner silence that allows them to act from depth, not reflex. Stillness is a daily practice. It's found in early morning solitude, in the decision not to respond to every message, in the restraint not to argue when provoked. It's the moment you hear your heart racing and choose not to follow it. Because emotion may rise, but you don't have to rise with it. So if you feel pulled in every direction, overwhelmed, constantly reacting, come back to stillness, not once, every day, even for just a few minutes. Let the world be loud. You, be quiet. Let them shout. You listen. Listen. Let the moment pass. You remain. Because stillness is not absence. It is presence, the kind that cannot be shaken. 6. Reframe before reacting. Every moment in life offers you two choices, to react blindly or to respond wisely. And the difference between the two isn't luck or even intelligence. It's perspective. It's your ability to pause and reframe the moment before it hijacks your clarity, before it steals your peace. We often believe that what upsets us is the event, the words someone said, the mistake we made, the problem we didn't expect. But the Stoics made a profound distinction. It's not the event. It's the interpretation of the event that creates suffering. Marcus Aurelius said, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." Reframing is that power. It's the conscious act of asking, what else could this mean? Is this obstacle actually an opportunity? Is this attack really about me, or about their own pain? That mental shift, that reframing, breaks the chain of automatic emotional reaction. It gives you a moment of space. And in that space, wisdom can enter. Let's say you receive criticism. The reactive mind says, "They're attacking me. I have to defend myself." But the reframed mind says, "Maybe there's a useful lesson here. Maybe this isn't about me. Maybe it's about their expectations or their story, not mine." That doesn't mean you ignore everything. It means you evaluate before absorbing. You assess before responding. You don't just let emotions drive the wheel. You bring awareness to the steering. This is what separates strength from fragility. Fragile egos break under judgment. Strong minds reinterpret it. Fragility says, "They embarrassed me." Strength says, "They exposed something I can now work on." Fragility sees rejection as failure. Strength sees it as redirection. Fragility takes things personally. Strength sees them philosophically. But here's the challenge. Reframing is not a natural reflex. It must be trained. It requires emotional discipline, because the moment your ego is wounded, when someone disrespects you or circumstances go against your expectations, your nervous system lights up. The body reacts before the mind catches up. That's why the first step in reframing is to pause. Even a few deep breaths can buy you the time to regain perspective. Think of the mind like a lens. If the lens is cracked, distorted, or foggy, everything you see will be off, even if reality is fine. But when you clean the lens, when you adjust the focus, the same scene takes on a new meaning. That's what reframing does. It doesn't change the world. It changes how you see the world, and that, in turn, changes how you show up in it. One of the most powerful examples of this comes from Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor. In the darkest of conditions, he discovered that between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space lies our freedom. The Stoics would have agreed, the mind is not meant to be a sponge that absorbs every blow. It is a filter that shapes how we understand and endure it. So how do you practice this? Begin small. When something triggers you, a delay, a rude comment, a sudden change, ask, what's another way to see this? Is this traffic a curse or a moment of forced stillness? Is this rejection the end, or the beginning of a better fit? Is this failure humiliation or education? Each time you reframe, you reclaim. You take back control from the primitive part of your brain that wants to lash out, shut down, or spiral. You bring the higher mind, the Stoic mind, into the driver's seat. And that shift makes you untouchable, not because the world is easier, but because your interpretation is wiser. To live well is not to avoid difficulty, but to meet it with the right lens. To look at each moment and ask, how can I turn this into strength? Because the truth is, nothing is ever just what it seems. Life is not what happens to you. It's what you make of what happens. And reframing is how you make something meaningful out of what once felt unbearable. 7. Train your inner calm. Inner calm doesn't arrive by accident. It's not something you wake up with on a random Tuesday, and it's certainly not granted to you by the world. Calm is a discipline. It's a practice. And just like the body must be trained to endure pressure, the mind must be trained to remain still within it. We live in a world that conditions us to react instantly, emotionally, and often thoughtlessly. Every notification pulls you, every inconvenience tests you, and every disagreement dares you to escalate. If you haven't trained yourself to stay centered, you'll be dragged in every direction, ruled by every emotion, tossed around by the chaos of others. But a Stoic doesn't train for peace only when life is quiet. He prepares in the silence for the storm. The real test of calm isn't how you feel when things go your way. It's how you respond when they don't. When the flight is delayed, when the email stings, when someone crosses a boundary, do you collapse, or do you return to yourself? Training calm begins with awareness. You start by noticing what usually sets you off. Is it disrespect, lack of control, feeling misunderstood? The Stoic pays attention to these triggers not to avoid them, but to use them. Each one becomes a training ground, an opportunity to remain still, grounded, awake. Let's be clear. Calm isn't suppression. It's not pretending you don't feel. It's feeling fully, without reacting blindly. It's being the observer of your own storm. Imagine your mind like a lake. When you're agitated, it ripples. You can't see clearly, but when you learn to be still, truly still, the waters settle and reflection becomes possible. Some days, this training feels impossible. The world will poke at your wounds. People will misunderstand you. Life will deliver setbacks you didn't plan for. And that's when you train the most, not with force, but with presence. Not by pushing the emotion down, but by breathing it in and choosing not to become it. Meditation helps, journaling helps, but so does that simple decision to pause before you speak, to walk away before you retaliate, to wait 5 minutes before you reply to that message that triggered you. These small acts of restraint are not weakness. They are power, quiet power, and over time they build something extraordinary, a nervous system that doesn't panic every time the world shakes. And the more you train this, the more you notice. While others burn out, break down, or lash out, you remain composed, not because you don't feel the fire, but because you've built a stronger flame inside. One that doesn't burn uncontrollably, but warms you with presence and clarity. Seneca once said, "A man who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than necessary." He was pointing to the untrained mind, the one that lives in constant reaction. But you don't have to live that way. You can become the person who brings calm into the room, who lowers the temperature, not raises it, who listens without being defensive, who responds without aggression, who walks through the world, unshaken. So train, every single day, not for perfection, but for presence, not to feel superior, but to feel stable, because peace isn't a reward, it's a responsibility, and once you taste it, the kind of calm that doesn't come from the outside, but from the inside, you'll stop chasing noise and start choosing silence. 8. Let your mind lead the heart. There's a popular idea in today's world, follow your heart, and while it sounds poetic, the Stoic would pause, not because the heart is unimportant, but because it is impulsive. The heart feels, the heart desires, the heart pulls. But if you let it lead without question, it can drag you into chaos, into decisions made in heat, into regrets born from momentary emotion. That's why the Stoic path doesn't silence the heart, it guides it. And the compass is reason. Your emotions are real, but they are not always right. They arise from memory, fear, hope, past wounds, unmet needs. They fluctuate with weather, sleep, hunger, hormones. One day you're in love, the next you're in doubt. 1 hour you're certain, the next you're overwhelmed. If you let your heart drive the vehicle without oversight, you'll find yourself lost in loops of reaction. But when the mind leads, with clarity, with principle, with perspective, the heart finds something it deeply craves but rarely names: stability. Think of reason not as cold, but as calm, not as distant, but as discerning. It doesn't cancel feeling, it contains it. It listens to the message beneath the emotion. When the heart says, "I'm hurt," the mind asks, "Why?" And what's the best response? When the heart says, "I want this now," the mind asks, "But at what cost?" That dialogue between head and heart is what maturity looks like. It's what wisdom demands. The Stoic doesn't deny that he feels, he just refuses to be ruled by feeling. Epictetus said, "It's not things that upset us, but our judgment about things." The moment you realize that, you begin to question the urgency of emotion. You begin to see that many of your deepest regrets didn't come from lack of feeling, but from lack of reflection. And if you could rewind those moments, it's not less feeling you'd wish for, but more thinking. This isn't a call to become robotic. On the contrary, it's an invitation to become fully human, a being with both emotion and awareness. When your mind leads, your heart can speak safely. It won't need to shout. It won't hijack your actions. It will be heard, but not obeyed blindly. We've all seen what happens when people let feelings drive. Relationships formed in lust and broken in anger. Words spoken in rage and regretted in silence. Money spent in excitement and mourned in debt. The Stoic path is different. It says before you act, understand. Before you chase, question. Before you speak, reflect. This is not repression, it is responsibility. Letting your mind lead the heart is like putting a wise captain in charge of a passionate crew. The crew still sings, still sways, still hopes and fears, but the ship doesn't crash. The direction is steady, and when storms come, the captain holds the course. That's what you must become, the steady hand inside your own emotional system. And yes, it's hard. When someone disrespects you, the heart cries for revenge. When life disappoints you, the heart mourns and wants to shut down. But in that space, between the heart's impulse and your final action, lies your true strength. That's where character is forged. That's where clarity lives. So ask yourself in every emotional moment, what would my highest self do right now? Not the self driven by pride or fear or instant gratification, but the self shaped by virtue, by wisdom, by legacy. That's who you want making the decisions. That's who you want leading the way. because when your mind leads the heart, something beautiful happens. Your life becomes less reactive and more intentional. You stop chasing highs and start building meaning. You stop breaking under feelings and start standing inside them. And over time, the heart learns to trust the mind. It softens, it steadies, and together they move, not perfectly, but powerfully, toward a life of strength, clarity, and peace. 9. Emotions pass. Principles remain. In the heat of the moment, every emotion feels permanent. Anger seems justified. Fear feels absolute. Sadness sinks into the bones as if it will never leave. But every storm, no matter how violent, passes. Every wave crashes and returns to stillness. And this is one of the greatest teachings of Stoicism. Emotions are temporary. They rise, they fall, they distort, and then they dissolve. But what doesn't dissolve, what endures long after the emotion has passed, are your principles, your choices, your values, your integrity. These are not passing clouds. They are the sky, and the Stoic learns to navigate life not by the mood of the day, but by the direction of his character. He does not let momentary emotions sabotage permanent commitments. Think about how many people abandon what matters to them, their health, their relationships, their goals, just because a single emotion took over for a few hours. A burst of anger ruins a bond built over years. A wave of laziness derails a month of discipline. A flicker of doubt stops a dream in its tracks. And afterward, when the emotion fades, what's left? Regret, shame, and the quiet voice inside that says, "I knew better." The Stoic listens to that voice before the damage is done. He reminds himself, what I feel right now is real, but it is not final. I don't need to act on every urge. I don't need to say everything I feel. I don't need to believe every thought that comes in a storm, because storms are not truths. They are tests, and the only way to pass the test is to anchor yourself in what doesn't move, in your principles, in your reason, in your higher self. These are your constants. And when everything else is chaos, when your emotions scream, when others provoke, when the world pulls you in every direction, you return to those constants. Imagine a captain at sea. If he changed course every time the wind shifted, he'd never arrive. But the Stoic is like the captain who sails through the storm, guided not by the winds, but by the stars. That's what your principles are. Stars. They don't shift. They don't lie. They don't disappear just because the night gets darker. So, what are your stars? What are the values you refuse to betray, even when you're tired, triggered, or tempted? Is it honesty, patience, kindness, discipline? Once you know what they are, write them down. Speak them to yourself. Let them become the lens through which you see every emotional wave. Because when emotion and principle clash, let principle win. Always. This isn't easy. There will be moments when every part of you wants to yell, run, give up, retaliate. But those are the sacred moments, the training grounds, the places where your future is being shaped. Because in those moments, when you choose to hold the line, when you choose not to betray your principles just to relieve a feeling, you're not just controlling emotion. You're becoming someone unbreakable. And over time, something remarkable happens. Your emotions begin to respect your boundaries. They still rise, but they don't control you. They become like waves hitting a stone, felt, seen, but never shifting the foundation. You begin to trust yourself. Others begin to trust you. And the storms that used to define you no longer decide your path. So next time you feel overwhelmed by sadness, anger, lust, fear, pause, breathe. Ask, what matters more, this feeling or my integrity? The answer may not make you feel better in the moment, but it will make you stronger for life, because in the end, emotions pass. But who you become by how you respond, that is what stays. 10. The Stoic acts from clarity, not chaos. The world is loud. Every day you're surrounded by noise, demands, expectations, opinions, internal battles, emotional waves. And in the midst of that storm, one thing becomes clear. If you don't create clarity within, chaos will guide you without. The Stoic does not act from pressure. He acts from principle, not from confusion, but from conviction. He waits for the dust to settle before he steps forward. This is what separates reaction from response. Anyone can react. It's easy, it's fast, it's emotional. But response requires something more rare. Awareness. When you act from clarity, you're not driven by impulse. You're grounded. You're awake. You're connected to something higher than your ego or your current mood. Clarity isn't something you find by accident. It's earned. It's cultivated in silence, in stillness, in study, in reflection. It's choosing to pause instead of explode. It's asking yourself, is this action aligned with who I want to be? It's letting time and distance reveal what the moment hides, because chaos always demands urgency, but truth rarely does. A Stoic doesn't need to rush. He doesn't need to prove, impress, or dominate. His power doesn't come from volume. It comes from vision, from knowing where he stands and why, from seeing the emotion rise and fall without letting it dictate his next move. He lives by the clarity of what matters, not by the chaos of what's loud. And here's the truth. Most people around you are living in emotional autopilot. They say things they don't mean. They chase what they don't need. They fight battles that aren't theirs. Why? Because they haven't paused long enough to ask, what do I actually value? What am I really trying to protect? The Stoic asks these questions every day, not to feel superior, but to stay centered. When you act from chaos, even good intentions lead to destruction. You might defend yourself, but burn bridges. You might chase a goal, but lose your soul. But when you act from clarity, even hard choices lead to peace, because they come from alignment, not confusion. Think of clarity like a lamp in the dark. It doesn't stop the night from falling, but it allows you to walk through it without stumbling. Chaos screams, clarity whispers, but that whisper, when practiced long enough, becomes the only voice you trust. So how do you build it? You simplify, you reflect, you strip away the noise, you learn to sit with discomfort instead of running from it. You journal, you ask hard questions, you wait, and when the moment to act arrives, you move not because you're forced to, but because you've chosen to. The Stoic is not perfect. He feels deeply, he struggles, he stumbles, but he trains himself to act only when the waters within are clear, not in rage, not in desperation, but in alignment. His actions are deliberate, his choices are calm, his path is firm, not because the world is stable, but because he is. So let this be your compass. Never act from chaos. When your chest tightens, when your mind races, when your heart pounds, stop, wait, breathe. Ask yourself, am I clear or am I reacting? And if you're not clear, don't move yet. Let the emotion pass. Let the truth rise. Because the action that comes after clarity, that's the one that changes your life. There's something powerful that happens when you stop letting emotions run the show. You begin to see more clearly, you begin to choose more wisely, and slowly you build a life that isn't shaken by every insult, every disappointment, or every shifting mood. A life guided not by chaos, but by clarity. That's the Stoic way, not to feel less, but to respond better, to replace reactivity with responsibility, to let your mind and principles lead where emotions once ruled. And maybe that's the real strength we're after, not the loud kind that overpowers, but the quiet kind that endures, the kind of strength that lets you walk through storms, not because you don't feel them, but because you've trained yourself not to be carried away by them. You've learned to pause, to breathe, to reflect, and to choose again and again what aligns with your highest self. So the next time your emotions try to take the wheel, stop. Ask yourself, is this how I want to be remembered? Not just by others, but by yourself. Because every moment is a chance to act from your deepest clarity or your loudest chaos. The Stoic doesn't chase control. He practices it, one moment, one decision, one breath at a time. And in that discipline is freedom. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who's been letting emotions speak too loudly. And if you're ready to reclaim your inner stillness, subscribe for more Stoic reflections like this. Until next time, stay grounded, stay clear, and above all, stay in command of your life.